All right, in this video we're going to look at the first 13 slides of the lymphatic system, chapter 16, and give a brief overview of the structures of it and how it works. So the lymphatic system, it says, is a vast collection of cells and biochemicals that travel in lymphatic tissues. Contains a network of vessels that assist in circulating fluids and closely associated with the cardiovascular system. It actually is kind of a cousin of the cardiovascular system. So if I have the heart over here, and then the systemic system, I'm going to have this circulatory route. And we'll say in this area is the capillary bed. I'll just kind of draw all these little. So it's called circulation because it's a circle. The blood that goes out from the heart goes out, carries the oxygen to all these things, and then comes back to the heart carrying the CO2, and then that goes to the lungs and then back to the heart. Well, what happens in this particular area, this capillary bed, is I'm going to have, instead of a circulatory system, a circle, I'm going to have a one-way street that's going to start there and go back to the heart. And this is the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system actually starts in the capillary beds, and it's draining the excess fluid back to the heart. So it says three functions of the lymphatic system: transports the excess fluid away from the interstitial spaces, which was the areas of the capillary beds, and returns it to the bloodstream. In the digestive system, we're going to see that there's a special little area, a special little capillary that's designed to absorb lipids. So in the digestive system, when we're breaking down those four organic compounds, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, lipids don't play like the other ones. The other ones can go straight into the bloodstream. The lipids have to be absorbed in a special lymphatic capillary. And then with all of this, there are special places and cells that are going to be used to defend our body against diseases. This would be, in a way, our immune system. So as it says here, the term immune system refers to the fact that many of the cells of the lymphatic system provide both defense against disease and permanent immunity against future infections. And we'll look at that towards the end. So the lymphatic pathways, like we said, we have lymphatic capillaries, which are going to start in the little tissue capillary beds, and then the excess fluid, because remember we said on the arterial end of the capillary bed we have plasma being pushed out by hydrostatic pressure or blood pressure, and it's carrying oxygen. The cells are going to take that yummy oxygen and they're going to use it to produce energy. Whoop, that's supposed to be a smile. Yeah. And it's going to release carbon dioxide, which is going to be in the fluid, and that's going to be pulled back in by way of osmosis. But there's a percentage of what leaves that never gets pulled back in, and that gets into the lymphatic system. So there's this constant buildup of pressure, and then it gets pushed into the lymphatic system. Now there's a series of vessels as it goes through to end up getting into back into the circulatory system, and the only one I'm really going to concern ourselves with as far as naming are these last two, and they're called lymphatic ducts. And again, I don't know what's going on with my little, it's terrible trying to draw things again on with the mouse pad, but whatever it is, these collecting ducts are what we're going to the only ones I'm worried about you really naming. So the lymphatic system carries excess fluid from interstitial spaces back to the bloodstream, and the lacteals are the ones in the intestinal tract that we're going to look at mainly in the digestive chapter, but you'll need to know it now, but really talk about it more in the digestive chapter. These are the name for the special lymphatic capillaries that are there to absorb the fats. So lymphatic capillaries, again, they are going to be closed in tubes. It's a one-way street. They start in the capillary bed. So networks parallel blood capillaries throughout the body. They're thin-walled. They're thin-walled because it's simple squamous epithelium. That's pretty thin. The interstitial tissue fluid, which is the fluid in between the cells, enters the lymphatic capillary, and once it does, it's no longer called interstitial fluid. It is now called lymph. All right, lymph is the name of the fluid that's in the lymphatic system. And as these small capillaries move back towards the heart, they're going to merge into other lymphatic vessels. Now, as these lymphatic vessels go through and try to go back to the heart, they're very similar to veins. They might be a little bit thinner, but they're very similar to veins. They also have 3 layers. You don't have to know the names of the layers, but you do have to know that they have valves just like the veins do. So as it works, it has the same basic mechanism of getting the lymph back to where it needs to go by way of valves, just like the veins did with valves getting the blood back to the heart. Now, this is the one that we're going to look at, the one down here. Now, just to talk about this, lymphatic trunks, to talk about the ones up here, these are as these vessels are merging together, they get into what are called trunks, and they're basically named for the region. And you should be able to tell me most of these. You should know where the lumbar region is, the intestinal region, the intercostal region, the bronchiomediastinal region, the subclavian region, and the jugular region. You should be able to tell me where these are. Now, that's not something I'm going to spend a lot of time on in here, but I would expect you that's a fair game on the test. Not something I'm going to look to ask questions about, but if I see them again, I think that's fair game. These 2, which are the lymphatic collecting ducts, are the ones that I do expect you to know. And there's just 2. One is called the thoracic duct, and one is called the right lymphatic duct. And you need to know those 2. So in this next picture, you'll see the dividing line. So if I'm looking at this picture up here on the left, you can see how it's darkened right through here. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to erase it so that you can see. It's not super easy to tell, but so this is the boundaries of those 2. Now, I can figure out what most of everything, how it works, and an idea of how it's formed, why it's kind of even. But in this, the lymphatic ducts are not even. The right lymphatic duct drains everything above the diaphragm to the right, and then the thoracic duct drains everything else. So everything below the diaphragm and everything to the left of the diaphragm. So again, it's not even. So if I go ahead and draw this little line here, so this is not even. Kind of like my drawing, it's not even. So remember, and again, I probably would have named these a little different. I think it's kind of weird that the one called the thoracic duct is the one of the 2 that's more than just the thoracic cavity. I kind of probably would have tried to use that and kind of denote that this right side is only the thoracic cavity, whatever. But whatever the case may be, that's the way it's set up. That the right lymphatic duct is everything above the diaphragm and to the right. The thoracic duct is everything else. And so also in this, hopefully no one experiences this or has to deal with it or knows someone that has, but you probably have breast cancer, which is a very common thing. It is a lot of times they have to take the axillary lymph nodes. Again, axillary means armpit, all right? It's the scientific way to say armpit. So these axillary lymph nodes are ones that are going to be draining the lymph area that is the mammillary area. So if someone has breast cancer, a lot of times they will remove these lymph nodes to just make sure that there's no spread. So this is the pathway, lymphatic capillary to vessels. We're going to have afferent vessels that merge into a thing called a lymph node we'll talk about in just a second. And as it goes through the lymph node, which is going to help clean it, we'll have a few, if we have 4 afferent vessels, they're going to merge into 2 efferent vessels. Remember, afferent is incoming, efferent is outgoing. So the efferent lymphatic vessels start forming into trunks. And then finally, the trunks collect into collecting ducts. And there's only 2 collecting ducts, right? All right. Now, lymphatic tissue, or lymph, is tissue fluid that has entered the lymphatic capillary, and lymph formation depends on tissue fluid formation. Capillary blood pressure filters water and small molecules from the plasma. That fluid, as it exits, is called tissue fluid. And it's going to have about the same composition as blood plasma, except it does not contain the large plasma proteins. All right, so we're not talking about blood itself, because that has formed elements. Remember, formed elements and plasma. Tissue fluid is mainly plasma. The only difference is the large plasma proteins can't cross that barrier. So the plasma proteins remain in the blood plasma to maintain osmotic pressure. That as the fluid is being pushed out, it's causing it to become a magnet for the water to try and pull it back in. So tissue fluid is blood plasma minus the plasma proteins. So as this tissue fluid starts increasing, we will start having a net formation of tissue fluid, because more fluid exits the capillary that gets pulled back in. So I'm going to have this constant buildup of pressure in the tissues. And so the increase in tissue fluid hydrostatic pressure, which is what we're talking about, forces fluid into the lymphatic capillaries, forming lymph. And again, lymph is the name of the fluid inside the lymphatic capillaries, or lymphatic vessels. If there's a problem with this, it's going to cause an accumulation of excess tissue fluid, which is what we refer to as edema. Now, lymph inside lymphatic vessels has low hydrostatic pressure, like veins, and so they have several mechanisms to help it get back, and they're basically the same things as were for veins. Contraction of skeletal muscle helps push it through by compressing the lymphatic vessel, moving lymph up to the next valve, and then moves it up to the next one, and so forth. Respiratory process creates a low and high change between pressure in the thorax, and that helps push it up. And then the larger lymphatic vessels will have some smooth muscle that will help it. Again, valves keep it from having backflow, and lymphatic flow is highest during physical exercise, because I'm using the skeletal muscles. Duh. It's causing me to breathe heavier, causing the respiratory process to cause a greater difference between pressure. Duh. All right. So one of the many things that exercise does that is so helpful, is that it's forcing fluid to start flowing more. It cleans your body. So the way this works, and this is a lymphatic capillary, and you can see there's these little cells that are in here. And what I want you to think about them as, these cells as little trap doors. And so I've got this capillary bed here, and so I've got some fluid coming out, I've got some fluid being pulled back in, but I've got a constant increase in the fluid here. And so I'm increasing the pressure. And as the pressure puts on these little things, these little cells, it'll get to a point where it pushes them open, and the fluid rushes in, and that decreases the pressure. So it's this little hinge trap door to try and make sure that we keep the pressure stable, but as it gets to a certain point, we relieve it by letting the fluid go in and relieve the pressure. So the rows of lymphatic capillaries, it absorbs dietary fats. This is what, again, we call the lacteal, delivery of absorbed fats to the bloodstream, and that's because that's the point of this one. Returns small proteins filtered by the blood capillaries to the bloodstream. Collects excess interstitial fluid, which is what we're pointing out here. Delivery of excess fluid to the bloodstream. Again, just kind of same thing here. Delivery of foreign particles to the lymph nodes. Because what's going to happen is if I have a bacteria that's trying to hurt me, right now I'm looking at the all right, it's going to get absorbed into here, and then I'm going to get into these little lymphatic things called lymph nodes, which where they're like little car washes almost. As the fluid comes in, they're monitoring it, and if any bad guys that get in, they will attack it.